Please welcome my new partner, the millionaire declared proudly on stage, but gasps erupted as his ex-wife appeared holding twins, and he dropped unconscious in front of everyone. Hi, my beautiful family, it's your Mr. Peter. Before anything else, please allow me to offer you this prayer, not just from my lips, but from the softest corners of my heart. May God breathe His light into your soul today. May every invisible weight you carry be lifted and every unanswered prayer begin to unfold in beauty. May He stand beside you in silence and speak peace where no one else can reach. I pray the sorrow you never shared is turned into strength, the loneliness is replaced with warm arms of love, and that the days ahead surprise you with healing, kindness, and joy that makes you weep. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are deeply loved. Now, family, today I must speak honestly and gently. I'm very upset today. I see many of you don't finish the stories, but when I ask, you'll say, "Yes, Mr. Peter, we love it." So let me ask you lovingly, will you truly stay and watch the full story from the beginning to the very end? Every moment is written with purpose. Don't leave halfway. I need you now more than ever. And for those who are new here, welcome, my dear friends. Please don't leave. Give James, my brother who's reading today, just one chance. I wrote the story, every word. The voice may be different, but the soul is still mine. And if James doesn't touch your heart the way I do, tell me gently. I promise he won't continue, but please don't judge too soon. Just stay with us and feel the story. Also, I ask just one small thing. Please pray for me. No need for long words. Just whisper my name to heaven once. That's enough. Like the video. Leave a comment. Watch until the last second. Let me know you're truly here, because your love is the reason I continue. Now breathe with me. Let the world fall away, and let James begin the story. A story written with tears, faith, and love, from my heart to yours.
Why does my tea taste like pennies, Glennie? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Anne Robles watched her husband's hand freeze halfway to his coffee cup, his knuckles white against the porcelain. For 3 heartbeats, their kitchen became a battlefield. Then he smiled, that practiced, camera-ready smile that had fooled her for 5 years. "Pennies, darling, perhaps you're getting sick." Sick. Yes, she'd been sick for months, but not the way he meant. Anne's hand trembled as she set down the cup, the one he always insisted on preparing himself. "Such a devoted husband," her friends gushed, "making you tea every night." If only they knew devotion could taste like mercury, served with honey to mask the poison. "I found the bottles, Glennie." Her voice came out steadier than her hands. "Hidden in your study. Mercury sulfate, thallium, everything you've been feeding me." His coffee cup met the table with a soft click. When he looked up, the mask had dropped entirely. The man staring back at her was a stranger wearing her husband's face. "Clever girl," he said softly. "Too clever." Anne's phone sat on the counter, recording everything. One tap would send it all to the cloud, to the police, to... Glennie moved faster than she thought possible. His hand closed around her wrist, wedding ring cutting into her skin as he twisted. The phone clattered across marble, skittering out of reach. "You know what I love about mercury poisoning." His breath was hot against her ear. "Everyone thinks you're going insane. The paranoia, the tremors, the accusations. Poor Anne, they'll say. She was never quite right after losing the baby." The baby. The miscarriage 6 months ago that started everything. Or maybe it had started long before, and she'd been too in love to see. "That wasn't a miscarriage," she whispered, the final piece clicking into place. Insurance policies are so much easier to collect when there are no heirs." He released her wrist only to grab her throat. "Did you really think I'd let you dilute my empire with children? Watch you pour attention into mewling brats instead of making me money?" Anne clawed at his hands, but the months of poison had stolen her strength. Black spots danced in her vision as he squeezed tighter. "Here's what happens now," Glennie continued conversationally, as if discussing dinner plans. "You're going to have an accident. Tragic, really. Mentally unstable wife. History of paranoid delusions. Takes too many pills. I'll cry at your funeral. Maybe I'll even name a foundation after you." Through the roaring in her ears, Anne heard something else, a sound from upstairs. Footsteps, light, uncertain, too young to be in this house of horrors. "Annie," a small voice called. "Are you okay?" Her sister, 19-year-old Carmela, staying with them while attending art school. Sweet, trusting Carmela, who Glennie had been mentoring. Oh God, the late-night studio sessions. The way Carmela had been glowing lately, secretive, wearing new jewelry. "Run!" Anne tried to scream, but Glennie's grip turned it into a wheeze. Carmela appeared in the doorway, silk nightgown Anne didn't recognize clinging to her young body. Her sister's face transformed from confusion to horror to something worse. Guilt. "You said she was at her book club," Carmela whispered to Glennie. The betrayal hit harder than his hands around her throat. Anne's vision blurred with tears as the truth unraveled. Her husband, her baby sister, in her own home. "Plans change, sweetheart." Glennie's voice held an edge of irritation. "Go back to bed. I'll handle this." But Carmela stood frozen, watching her sister's face turn blue. "You're killing her. She's killing herself. Jealous wives often do." His grip loosened just enough for Anne to gulp air. "Unless you'd prefer I tell your parents about the videos, the ones you begged me to take." Videos? Anne's stomach heaved. Her baby sister, barely out of high school. "I'm pregnant," Anne gasped out. The words surprised everyone, including herself. She'd only found out that morning, hadn't even processed it yet. But now, with death closing in, the secret burst free. Glennie's hands fell away. "You're lying." Anne collapsed, gulping air, hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. 2 months, twins. The doctor called this afternoon. She saw the calculations in his eyes. Twins meant complications. Twins meant questions if she disappeared. Twins meant witnesses to his finances, heirs to challenge his will manipulations. "Get out," he said quietly. "You have 10 minutes before I call my friends at Bellhaven." Bellhaven, the private psychiatric facility where difficult wives disappeared, where medications ensured compliance and signatures on any document he needed. Anne struggled to her feet, using the counter for support. Carmela hadn't moved, tears streaming down her young face, trapped between guilt and horror. "Come with me," Anne reached for her sister. "Please, Mela. He's using you. The videos. He'll destroy you with them." 5 minutes, Glennie corrected, pulling out his phone. "Dr. Morrison is always eager for new patients." Anne ran, not to their bedroom. Nothing there mattered now. To her studio, where she grabbed the one thing that might save her. The external drive hidden inside a hollowed sculpture. Months of evidence, backed up where Glennie couldn't reach. She heard him on the phone, voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Yes, doctor. Violent episode. Threatening to harm herself and others. Will need discretion, of course. No time for clothes, for money, for dignity." Anne stumbled through the back garden, designer heels sinking into mud, November rain soaking through her silk dress. Behind her, security lights blazed to life. "Find her," Glennie's roar echoed across the grounds. The crazy bitch couldn't have gone far. Anne ran deeper into the storm, one hand pressed to her belly where 2 hearts beat beneath her own. The rain washed away her tears, her blood from where branches tore at her, her old life with each desperate step. She didn't stop when her heel broke, didn't stop when gravel shredded her bare feet, Didn't stop until she collapsed in an alley 20 blocks away, retching bile and rain and the taste of pennies that would haunt her forever. "Lord have mercy," a voice said above her. "Child, what happened to you?" Anne looked up into the weathered face of a homeless woman, shopping cart parked against the dumpster, eyes kind despite the hardness of the streets. "Please," Anne whispered, hands still clutched over her womb. "I'm pregnant. He's coming. Please." The woman studied her for a long moment, the designer dress now torn and muddy, the bruises blooming on her throat, the terror in her eyes that no money could hide. "Come on then," the woman said finally, helping Anne to her feet. "I know a place. Women like us, we got to stick together." As sirens wailed in the distance, Anne Robles disappeared into the underground network of the forgotten, the abused, the discarded. She'd entered that alley as a millionaire's wife. She left it as another casualty of love turned poison, carrying the only treasures he'd failed to steal, the 2 lives growing inside her, and the drive that would one day bring him down. The rain kept falling, washing away her footprints, her blood, any trace of the woman she'd been. But it couldn't wash away the promise she made with each agonizing step. "We'll survive this, all 3 of us. And one day, Glennie Scott, you'll taste your own poison." Thunder crashed overhead, drowning out the sound of her old name being screamed into the night. Anne Robles was dead. What crawled through that storm was something else entirely. A mother, a survivor, a reckoning 12 years in the making. Chapter 2. Angels in the Darkness. "Push! Your babies are coming whether this storm wants them or not," Anne screamed into the rolled leather belt between her teeth as another contraction ripped through her. The basement of St. Catherine's abandoned church shook with December thunder, as if God himself was announcing the twins' arrival. 6 months. She'd hidden for 6 months, her belly swelling with life while her heart withered with betrayal. Now, in the coldest night of the year, her children had chosen to fight their way into a world that didn't want them. "I can't," Anne sobbed, collapsing back onto the mildewed mattress. "It's too early. They're only 7 months. 8 months, Marisol corrected firmly, her hands steady despite being gnarled with age. The 60-year-old former midwife had delivered babies in Guatemalan war zones before fleeing to America. "You were already pregnant when you ran. The poison, the stress, it made you smaller, not them. These babies are fighters." The basement door crashed open. 3 women stumbled in, carrying boiled water from the shelter kitchen, towels stolen from a laundromat, and a flashlight that flickered with dying batteries. "His men are searching the hospitals," one reported breathlessly. "Showing your picture, saying you're dangerous." Anne laughed or maybe screamed. She couldn't tell anymore. Dangerous. Yes, she was dangerous now. A woman with nothing left to lose, pushing life from her body in a basement that smelled of rat droppings and desperation. "The first one's coming," Marisol announced. "I see the head. Dark hair like yours, Anne." "No," the word tore from Anne's throat. "Not like mine. Nothing like his." Please God, nothing like his. But God wasn't listening, or maybe he was. The baby emerged in a rush of fluid and pain, silent as a secret. Too silent. Why isn't he crying? Anne tried to sit up, reaching for the small, still form in Marisol's hands. Why isn't my baby crying? Marisol worked with brutal efficiency, clearing airways, rubbing the tiny chest. Nothing. The other women formed a circle, some praying in Spanish, others in languages Anne didn't recognize, all of them understanding the weight of a silent baby. "Please," Anne sobbed, her tears falling onto her son's perfect face. "Please, I've lost everything else. Not him too. Please." She pressed her lips to his forehead, tasting her own tears and blood. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his skin. I'm sorry I couldn't give you a better world, but please, mi amor, please fight. For me, for your sister." As if her words were a spell, the baby gasped. A thin wail escaped his lips, growing stronger with each breath. The women cheered, some crying, as Joaquin announced himself to the world with all the fury of the storm outside. "He waited for his mama's tears," Marisol said softly, wrapping him in a towel that had seen better days. "Some babies need to know they're loved before they'll stay." Anne clutched her son, but her body wasn't done. The second twin was coming, and something was wrong. "She's turned wrong." Marisol's voice lost its warmth. "Breach. Anne, this is going to hurt." "Everything already hurts," Anne gasped. Her son's weight on her chest was the only thing anchoring her to consciousness. What followed was agony that made poison taste sweet. Marisol's hands inside her, turning the baby as Anne screamed prayers in English and Spanish, begging any saint who'd listen to spare her daughter. "I can't stop the bleeding," someone whispered. "More towels. We need a hospital." "No hospitals," Anne managed to snarl between contractions. "I'd rather die here than let him find them." Esperanza entered the world, feet first, as if already running from something. She was smaller than her brother, bluer, taking her first breath only after Marisol breathed her own air into tiny lungs. "Stubborn," Marisol pronounced, handing the wailing infant to Anne. "Like her mother." Anne lay there, a baby on each side of her chest, blood pooling beneath her faster than the women could soak it up. The flashlight died, leaving them in darkness lit only by candles someone had stolen from the sanctuary upstairs. "Am I dying?" Anne asked conversationally. It seemed important to know, with her children's skin against hers, their hearts beating in rhythm with what might be her last breaths. "Not on my watch," Marisol said fiercely. She was doing something between Anne's legs, something that hurt worse than birth. But Anne was floating now, watching from somewhere near the ceiling. She saw herself, a broken woman on a dirty mattress, designer dress long since traded for shelter cast-offs, hair matted with sweat and blood, but also luminous, her face glowing as she whispered to her babies. "Your names," she told them, aware the women had gone silent, recording what might be last words. "Joaquin, for San Joaquin who prepared the way, you'll prepare our way back to the light. And Esperanza," her voice broke, "hope, because that's all I have left to give you." The bleeding slowed. Marisol had worked some battlefield magic with herbs and pressure, and probably prayer. Anne would live, though part of her wondered if that was a blessing or curse. "We need to move them," someone said. "If infection sets in without antibiotics." "I know someone," another woman offered. "A veterinarian who helps our kind. No questions, cash only. Our kind, the discarded women, the ones who ran in the night, the ones who gave birth in basements and raised children in shadows." As they prepared to move, wrapping the twins in whatever clean fabric they could find, Anne heard it. Cars on the street above, multiple engines, the systematic sound of a search. Everyone froze. "The blood," someone whispered. "They have dogs sometimes." Marisol made a decision. "You four take her and the babies through the tunnel to the subway maintenance shaft. I'll handle this." "Marisol, no. I've been handling men like him since before you were born." The older woman squeezed Anne's hand. "Go, raise those babies to be better than their father." They carried Anne through a crack in the basement wall she hadn't even known existed. The twins stayed silent against her chest, as if they already understood the price of sound. Behind them, they heard Marisol's voice, loud and slurred, playing the drunk homeless woman. "What blood? That's wine, officer. Christmas wine. Jesus' birthday, you know." The tunnel was a nightmare of rats and sewage, but Anne barely noticed. Her children were alive. She was alive. Every step away from that basement was a step towards something, not freedom, not yet, but survival. They emerged near a subway grate as dawn broke over the city. The storm had passed, leaving crystal air that made the whole world look new. Anne's first thought was that her children's first sunrise was beautiful, even from this angle. "The vet lives 6 blocks north," their guide said. "Can you make it?" Anne looked at her babies, their faces perfect despite their violent entrance. Joaquin had his father's strong jaw, but her gentle eyes. Esperanza had inherited those cutting cheekbones, but paired them with a mouth made for smiling. "I can make it anywhere," Anne said, and meant it. "We all can." As they walked through empty dawn streets, Anne made promises to her hours-old children. Not of wealth or comfort or safety, she couldn't guarantee those. But love. Love that would be armor and weapon both. Love that would teach them to survive without becoming monsters. "Your father thinks we're dead," she whispered to them as they waited for the vet to answer his door. "Let him. We'll be ghosts, my angels. Beautiful, terrible ghosts that haunt his dreams." Joaquin yawned, tiny fist curling around her finger. Esperanza sighed, nestling deeper into her mother's warmth. They were 6 hours old and already home, even if home was just their mother's arms, and the promise of revenge served cold as winter dawn. Chapter 3. Learning to Live Again. "Mama, why are you crying?" Anne startled, quickly wiping her face as 5-year-old Esperanza padded into the janitor's closet that served as their makeshift bedroom. The financial magazine lay open on her lap, Glennie's face smiling from the cover, his arm around another interchangeable young woman. "Scott Empire Expands. Love and Success at 45, the headline mocked. "Just tired, mi amor," Anne lied, folding the magazine closed. But her daughter's eyes, those devastating eyes that could pierce souls, saw everything. "Is it the bad man again?" Esperanza climbed into her lap, small fingers tracing the tears Anne hadn't caught. "The one you look at when you think we're sleeping." Anne's heart clenched. 5 years old, and already her children knew there was a ghost haunting their mother. A ghost made of flesh and cruelty who lived in penthouses while they slept in closets. "Where's your brother?" Anne deflected, but Esperanza wasn't so easily distracted. "Drawing. He's always drawing the same man. Says he sees him in dreams." Ice flooded Anne's veins. She found Joaquin hunched over his sketch pad, a luxury she'd saved for months to afford. His latest drawing showed a man's face in startling detail, the strong jaw, the cold eyes, the smile that never reached them. Glennie, captured perfectly by a child who'd never met him. "Who is this, mijo?" Joaquin didn't look up. "The sad man. He comes to my dreams looking for something. I think he's looking for us." Anne knelt beside him, fighting the urge to tear the drawing to pieces. "Why do you think that?" "Because he looks like me." Joaquin finally met her eyes, and Anne saw Glennie so clearly it stole her breath. "Is he my papa?" The word hung in the air like a blade. Papa. Such a simple word that other children threw around carelessly. But her twins had learned not to ask, sensing the pain that lived in the spaces where fathers should be. "Your papa is gone," Anne said carefully. Not a lie. The man who'd been her husband was gone, replaced by a monster. "It's just us 3. "Forever?" Esperanza asked from the doorway. "Forever." That night, after her shift cleaning offices, Anne did something she'd never done before. She took paper from the recycling bin and began folding. Origami had been her meditation during pregnancy, learned from a Japanese woman at the shelter. Now her fingers created birds from newspaper, each one containing a single word cut from articles about Glennie. "Remember." She walked 20 blocks to the building where Scott Enterprises kept its headquarters. At 3 a.m., the streets belonged to ghosts like her. She released the first bird into the ventilation system, watching it disappear into the darkness. One bird, one word, one crack in his perfect world. The next morning, Glennie Scott stood in his office, staring at the origami crane on his desk. His secretary swore she hadn't seen anyone enter. Security footage showed nothing. But there it sat, delicate and damning, the word "remember" visible through the transparent wings. Probably just a prank, his assistant suggested, but Glennie's hands shook as he crushed the paper. Remember what? Remember who? Anne, watching from the building across the street where she cleaned windows, saw his silhouette pause at the glass. She allowed herself a small smile before returning to work. Minimum wage for maximum satisfaction. The birds continued, one every few days, always impossible to trace, always with a single word. Me. Soon. Watching. Justice. Glennie hired security experts, changed locks, moved offices. The birds found him anyway because Anne had spent 5 years learning the patterns of his life while he'd forgotten she'd ever existed. She knew which restaurants he favored, which gym he used, which women he discarded like tissues. "Mama's smiling more," Esperanza observed one evening, watching Anne prepare another bird. They lived in a converted storage unit now, a step up from the closet. Luxury in their world of shadows. "Is that so bad?" Anne asked, teaching her daughter how to fold the paper just right. Number, but it's a scary smile, like when the heroes in stories get ready to fight the dragon. From the mouths of babes, Anne kissed her daughter's head, breathing in the scent of cheap shampoo and innocence. Sometimes dragons need fighting, mi amor. Will we help? Joaquin looked up from his homework. He was already reading at a 3rd grade level, hungry for knowledge like it could fill the father-shaped hole in his life. No, Anne's voice was firm. This is my fight. Your job is to grow strong and smart and kind, to be everything. She stopped herself. Everything your father isn't. But the twins had inherited more than just their father's features. They had his cunning, filtered through their mother's pain into something sharper. They began leaving their own touches to the birds, Joaquin's drawings of eyes, always watching. Esperanza's pressed flowers, beautiful things that died too soon. Glennie's paranoia grew. He started drinking heavily, snapping at employees, cycling through women faster than ever. The newspapers called it executive stress. Anne called it justice, served one paper bird at a time. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. Anne was cleaning the executive bathroom when she heard voices through the vent, Glennie and his lawyer discussing the situation. "It has to be her," Glennie slurred. "Anne, she's alive, she's doing this." "Mr. Scott, your wife is dead. You identified the body yourself 5 years ago." Anne froze. "Body? What body? That junkie looked enough like her. Black hair, right height. The cops didn't question it." "Sir, with all due respect, you need to let this go. Dead wives don't send origami birds." "This one would." Glennie's laugh was bitter. "This one would crawl out of hell just to torment me. I should have made sure, should have seen the body burn." Anne's hands shook as she wrung out her mop. He'd claimed she was dead. Some poor woman had died unmourned, while Glennie used her corpse to close the book on his crimes. The magazines she'd seen made sense now. They all mentioned his tragic loss and how he'd moved on after his wife's death. That night, she held her children tighter than usual. They'd been erased. Officially, Joaquin and Esperanza Scott didn't exist. Their father had murdered them with paperwork before they'd even been born. "Mama, you're squishing us," Joaquin protested, but didn't pull away. "Sorry, my loves. Just remembering how precious you are." "More precious than diamonds?" Esperanza asked, their old game. "More precious than all the stars in the sky? More precious than revenge?" Joaquin's question cut through the darkness. Anne pulled back to look at her son. 5 years old, and already too wise. Yes, she said finally, more precious than anything. But later, as they slept, she folded another bird. This one from Glennie's own magazine cover, his smiling face transformed into wings. The word cut from the headline itself, dead. Let him wonder which one of them was the ghost. The next morning, Glennie found the bird in his locked car, sitting on the driver's seat like an accusation. He screamed, actually screamed, causing his driver to swerve. The photo made the society pages. Business titan has breakdown in traffic. Anne clipped the article carefully. Someday, when her children were older, she'd show them how their mother had fought dragons with nothing but paper and patience. How she'd haunted a man who thought he'd killed her, one fold at a time. But for now, she was content to watch from the shadows as Glennie Scott slowly unraveled, pulled apart by birds made from his own press clippings. Each one a reminder that the dead don't always stay buried, and sometimes they bring their children back with them. Chapter 4. The Children's Pain. The blood on Joaquin's shirt was still wet when Anne found him hiding behind the school dumpster. 8 years old and already learning that the world had teeth, and they were sharp for boys who wore shoes held together with duct tape. Mi amor, what happened? Anne knelt in the gravel, her cleaning uniform soaking up the puddle he'd been sitting in. They said I smell like garbage. His voice was steady, but she saw how his small fists clenched. Because they saw you picking me up in your work clothes. They said my dad must be a janitor too, or maybe a drunk who left us. Each word was a knife between Anne's ribs. She pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders shake, not with tears, but with rage too big for his small body. Then Miguel said at least he has a dad, even if he's in prison. And I... Joaquin pulled back, his face, Glennie's face made innocent, twisted with pain. I hit him, Mama. I kept hitting him until teachers pulled me off. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Shh, it's okay. It's not okay. The dam broke and 8 years of questions poured out. Why don't I have a dad? Why don't we have a house? Why do other kids have grandparents and cousins, and we have nobody? What did we do wrong? Anne's throat closed. How could she explain that they'd done nothing wrong except exist? That their crime was being born to a mother who'd loved the wrong man? Sometimes, she began carefully, families break. And when they break, we have to build new ones from the pieces. But why did ours break? Esperanza appeared from nowhere. She had a gift for that, moving silent as smoke. Her school uniform was clean but clearly second-hand, and Anne saw how she held herself apart from the other children at pickup. Was it because of us? No. The word came out harsher than intended. Anne pulled both children close, breathing in their scent, cheap soap and playground dust, and something uniquely theirs. Never think that. Never. That night, after they'd fallen asleep, Anne sat at their tiny table and made a decision that tasted like betrayal. She pulled out the photos she'd hidden for 8 years, her wedding album, salvaged from a life that felt like someone else's dream. The next morning, she showed them to the twins. "This was your father," she said simply, pointing to Glennie's smiling face. Young, handsome, his arm around her waist like she was something precious. The twins studied the photos in silence. Joaquin traced his father's jawline, seeing the mirror of his own. Esperanza stared at a photo of Anne in her wedding dress, radiant with joy that seemed foreign now. "He's dead?" Joaquin asked finally. The lie sat on Anne's tongue like poison. But looking at her children, at Joaquin's split lip from defending their honor, at Esperanza's eyes that had never known security, she couldn't bring herself to tell the truth. That their father was alive, rich, happy, that he'd chosen to erase them. "He's gone," she said instead. "He was sick, in his mind. He did bad things, and then he was gone." What kind of bad things? Esperanza's voice was clinical, like she was dissecting a frog in science class. Anne chose her words carefully. He hurt people. He took things that weren't his. He wasn't the man I thought I married. Did he hurt you? Joaquin's question was quiet, dangerous. Yes. Did he know about us? This was the hardest question. Anne closed her eyes, seeing Glennie's face that last night, his hands around her throat as she gasped out news of the pregnancy. Number, he was gone before you were born. The twins exchanged a look, that twin telepathy that still unnerved Anne sometimes. Then Esperanza spoke for both of them. Good. We don't want a father who hurts our mother. That should have been the end of it. But children's grief works in mysterious ways. Over the following weeks, the twins created a shrine to their imaginary dead father. Not the real Glennie, but a fantasy version built from fragments and wishes. Joaquin drew pictures of a man teaching him to ride a bike, to throw a ball, to tie a tie. Always the same face, Glennie's face, but softened with love that had never existed. Esperanza wrote letters to heaven, asking her dead father if he was proud of her straight A's, if he watched her dance recitals from the clouds, if he was sorry for the bad things. She left them on the fire escape, and Anne would sneak out at night to take them, unable to bear destroying her daughter's grief. The worst came on Father's Day. Anne found them at the cemetery, having taken 3 buses with their saved lunch money. They'd chosen a random grave, Robert Chen, beloved father, and laid handmade cards against the stone. We made him a grave, Joaquin explained when Anne found them. Since he doesn't have one, everyone should have a place to visit. Anne sank to her knees in the grass, pulling them close as her heart shattered. They were mourning a fiction, but their pain was real. They were grieving the father they should have had, the life they should have lived. I hate him, Esperanza whispered suddenly, surprising them all. I hate him for dying, for being sick, for leaving us alone. Esperanza, no! She pulled away, 8 years old and burning with righteous fury. He should have tried harder. He should have fixed his sick mind for us. Other dads do it. They go to therapy and take medicine and they try. But he just gave up and left us with nothing. Anne watched her daughter rage at a dead man who wasn't dead, at a father who'd never tried to be one. The irony was suffocating. Esperanza's anger would be so justified if directed at the truth. That night, Glennie Scott sat in his penthouse, staring at another origami bird. This one was different, made from a child's drawing, a picture of a family that had never existed. A father, a mother, 2 children, all holding hands under a rainbow. The word cut from a sympathy card, mourning. He drank himself unconscious, but not before calling his lawyer. I want you to check death certificates, he slurred. Children, twins, born about 8 years ago. Any Jane does, any. But there was nothing to find. Anne had made sure of that. Her children were ghosts, mourning a ghost, while the real monster lived in luxury, wondering if he was being haunted by the family he'd tried to kill. The next day, Anne found Joaquin teaching Esperanza to fight behind their building. We have to be strong, he explained solemnly. Since it's just us, we have to protect each other and Mama. From what? Esperanza asked, throwing a clumsy punch. From everything, Joaquin replied. From anyone who tries to hurt us like the bad people hurt Papa and made him sick. Anne bit her knuckle to keep from crying out. Her babies, trying to be warriors at 8 years old, taking responsibility for protecting each other from a world that had shown them no mercy. She made a decision then. The birds would continue, but her children would heal. She'd give them the father they needed, even if he was just a beautiful lie. Let them mourn a good man corrupted by sickness, rather than know their father was simply evil. I love you both more than all the stars, she told them that night, their ritual. More than diamonds, they chorused. More than justice, Joaquin added, because he was his mother's son. More than anything, Anne swore. More than anything that was, is, or ever will be. But after they slept, she folded another bird. This one from a photo she'd taken that day, the twins at the false grave, offering love to a father who didn't deserve it. The word cut from their handmade cards, unforgiven. Let Glennie choke on the love his children wasted on his memory. Let him wonder whose children mourned at strangers' graves. Let him drink himself to death, wondering if somewhere, someone grieved the man he could have been. The twins would heal. They would grow strong and whole despite the hole he'd left. But Anne would never forgive. And she'd make sure he knew it, one paper bird at a time. Chapter 5. The Heart Remembers. 10 years of saving, and Anne finally had enough for the dress. Not designer. Those days were buried with her old name, but respectable. Clean lines, modest cut, the kind of outfit that whispered, "Hire me," instead of screaming, "Refugee from tragedy." "You look beautiful, Mama," Esperanza said, fixing Anne's collar with 10-year-old hands that were already steadier than her mother's. "Like the ladies in the museums." "Not the ones cleaning them." Anne tried to joke, but her voice shook. Today's interview at the Morrison Gallery could change everything. A real job with benefits, normal hours, a chance to give her children something beyond survival. "You're going to get it," Joaquin said with the certainty only children could muster. "I dreamed it." His dreams. Anne tried not to shudder. Joaquin's dreams had been getting more vivid lately, always featuring the same man, searching for something, calling out names that sounded almost like theirs. The interview went better than Anne dared hope. Mrs. Morrison, the elderly gallery owner, looked at Anne's fabricated resume without suspicion, more interested in her genuine knowledge of art. "You understand color theory," Mrs. Morrison observed, watching Anne arrange a display. "The way light changes meaning. Not many people see that anymore." "I used to paint," Anne admitted, then caught herself. Maria Chen, the undocumented cleaner, wouldn't have had time for painting, just as a hobby. Back home. Home? Mrs. Morrison's eyes were kind but sharp. "Where was that?" "Far away," Anne said softly. "Another life." She got the job. For the first time in 10 years, Anne had a schedule that let her see her children in daylight, health insurance that meant Esperanza could get proper glasses, and co-workers who called her by name instead of just pointing at messes. It was there, arranging a new exhibition, that Anne learned about Glennie's latest obsession. $7 million for a painting of shadows. Her co-worker Marcus whistled, showing her the auction report. This Scott guy must be loaded. Anne's hands stilled on the frame she was hanging. Scott? Glennie Scott. You know, the entertainment mogul? Guy's been collecting like crazy the past few years. Rumor is he's trying to fill some void. Lost his wife tragically, never remarried, throws himself into art instead. Never remarried? Anne thought of the parade of young women in the magazines. Apparently none had stuck. Good. What kind of art does he collect? She asked carefully. Dark stuff mostly. Portraits of mothers and children, lots of religious imagery about redemption and forgiveness. Weird niche for a billionaire, but Marcus shrugged. Rich people are all crazy. That night, Anne researched Glennie's collection. Marcus was right. Every piece centered on themes of loss, maternal love, or children separated from parents. The most expensive acquisition was a massive oil painting titled Absolution Denied. He was trying to buy his way out of guilt. "Mama, you're making your scary face again," Esperanza observed from the doorway. Anne smoothed her expression. "Sorry, mi amor. Just thinking about work." "The gallery?" Joaquin joined his sister. "Can we come see it sometime?" "Maybe." Anne had kept them away from her new life, paranoid about connections, but seeing their eager faces. "There's a children's exhibition next month. Would you like to show some of your work?" The twins' explosion of joy was worth any risk. Over the following weeks, they created pieces with a fervor and recognized the need to be seen, to matter, to leave a mark on a world that had tried to erase them. Joaquin painted portraits that seemed to look through the canvas into viewers' souls. Esperanza crafted sculptures from found objects that told stories of resilience. Their art teacher called them prodigies. Anne called them survivors. The night of the children's exhibition arrived like a held breath. Anne watched her twins, dressed in their best clothes, secondhand but clean, explain their work to patrons with a confidence she'd never had at their age. They were radiant, alive, visible for the first time in their lives. Then the air changed. Anne felt him before she saw him. A presence that made her skin crawl and her heart race. She turned, and there he was. Glennie Scott, older, grayer, but still commanding the room like he owned it. Which, considering his donations to the gallery, he practically did. He was moving through the exhibition with the calculated interest of a collector, pausing at each piece. His trajectory would bring him to the twins' corner in minutes. Anne's body screamed run, but her children were here. She couldn't abandon them. Instead, she did what she'd learned in 10 years of hiding, became invisible. Stepped behind a pillar, angled her body away, became just another shadow in the gallery lighting. Glennie stopped at Joaquin's painting first. It was a portrait of Anne, though he'd never titled it Mother. Just Guardian, oil on canvas, her face emerging from darkness with eyes that held universes of pain and love. Anne watched Glennie study the painting, saw his hand rise unconsciously to his throat. Did he recognize her? Even translated through their son's eyes. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Who's the artist?" "That would be me." Joaquin stepped forward, 10 years old and fearless. "Joaquin Robles." Robles, Anne's maiden name, the one protection she'd given them. Glennie's face flickered with something. Recognition? No, impossible. He'd never bothered to learn her maiden name. "You painted this? At your age?" Glennie knelt to Joaquin's level, and Anne bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. Father and son, inches apart, mirrors of each other, separated by time and lies. "I paint what I see," Joaquin said simply. "This is my guardian. She saved us." "Us? My sister and me?" Joaquin gestured to Esperanza, who was watching with eyes too knowing for her age. "We're twins." Glennie's face went white. He stood abruptly, scanning the crowd, looking for something, looking for her. But Anne was already moving, using the crowd as cover. She made it to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall, pressing her hand over her mouth to muffle the sounds tearing from her throat. He'd been inches from their children, talking to them, kneeling before them like the father he'd refused to be. When she finally emerged, the exhibition was ending. She found the twins by their work, glowing with pride. "Mama, you missed it," Esperanza bounced. "A rich man wants to buy Joaquin's painting. He said it spoke to his soul." "He gave us his card," Joaquin added, holding up expensive cardstock. "Said he wants to mentor young artists. Can you believe it?" Anne took the card with numb fingers. Glennie Scott Enterprises. Direct line. An invitation to enter the lion's den. "We'll see," she managed. "Let's go home." But home felt different now. Contaminated. Glennie had been in the same room as his children, had looked at their faces and felt something. The careful walls Anne had built were cracking. That night, she didn't send an origami bird. She was too busy holding her sleeping children, memorizing their faces, preparing for a war that had suddenly shifted battlegrounds. In his penthouse, Glennie Scott stared at a photo he'd taken secretly on his phone. 2 children, twins, with faces that gnawed at his memory. The boy especially, Something about his jaw, his eyes, the way he held himself. "Impossible," he whispered to his empty home. But his hands shook as he poured another drink. The heart remembers what the mind tries to forget. And somewhere in the darkest part of his soul, Glennie Scott was beginning to remember what he'd thrown away. The ghosts were becoming flesh, and they were beautiful, brilliant, and everything he'd tried to prevent them from being. Anne folded one last bird that night from the gallery program. The word she chose made her smile through tears. Found. Let him wonder. Let him remember. Let him realize too late what he'd lost. The real haunting was about to begin. Chapter 6. When Paths Cross. Elena Winters entered the Morrison Gallery like a porcelain doll too close to breaking. Beautiful, expensive, and one sharp impact away from shattering completely. Anne recognized the performance immediately. The Hermes scarf wrapped just so to hide fingerprints, the practiced smile that never reached her eyes, the way she moved through space as if apologizing for taking up room in the world. "May I help you?" Anne asked, though recognition hit her like ice water. The society pages had been full of it. Glennie Scott's engagement to Senator Winters' daughter, a 23-year-old political science graduate with dreams of changing the world. The same age Anne had been when she'd believed his promises of protection. "I need something cheerful," Elena said, each word measured like medication. "For my new apartment, something that doesn't feel like a cage." The slip was unconscious, honest. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, eyes darting around the empty gallery, as if walls had ears and tongues that reported back to interested parties. Anne's chest tightened with familiar dread. The East Wing has some lovely pieces. Very bright. Following Anne deeper into the gallery, Elena moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had learned that sudden movements brought consequences. Under the skylights, harsh natural light revealed what studio makeup couldn't hide. The shadow along her jawline where fingers had pressed too hard, the way she favored her left side, the tremor in her hands that spoke of adrenaline constantly coursing through her system. They stopped before Van Gogh's tournesols, sunflowers that had always reminded Anne of the garden she'd once tended, back when she'd believed love could bloom instead of strangle. Elena stared at the golden petals as if they held answers to questions she was afraid to ask aloud. Then she began to cry, silently, the way women learn when tears become evidence against them. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, producing a tissue with the automatic efficiency of someone who'd perfected the art of invisible breakdown. "I don't know what's wrong with me anymore. Glenn says normal women don't fall apart over nothing." Glenn. The intimate nickname made Anne's skin crawl. She handed Elena a fresh tissue, her own hands betraying her with their trembling. "There's nothing wrong with you." "That's not what he says." The words spilled out like blood from a wound too long untended. "He says his first wife understood him better, never pushed his buttons or made him lose control. If she hadn't died in that accident, he'd never have to deal with someone as difficult as me." The lie hit Anne like a physical blow. "His first wife isn't dead." Elena's tears stopped abruptly. "What?" Panic flooded Anne's system. 10 years of hiding, of protecting her children, of carefully constructed invisibility, all of it balanced on the edge of this moment. But looking at Elena, at this young woman wearing bruises, Anne remembered too well. Silence felt like complicity. "The bathroom," Anne said quietly, scanning the gallery for witnesses. 2 minutes. She walked away before Elena could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the bathroom stall, Anne waited with the desperate hope that Elena would be smart enough to follow, brave enough to hear truth that might destroy them both. Elena entered 90 seconds later, locking the door behind her with hands that shook like autumn leaves. They stood in adjacent stalls, speaking through thin walls because proximity to truth required barriers. His wife didn't die, Anne said, her voice low and urgent. She escaped. He was poisoning her slowly, stealing her money, planning to have her committed. She ran one night and disappeared. He identified some other woman's body to close the case and collect insurance. How could you possibly know this? Anne rolled up her sleeve, revealing scars from broken glass and desperate flight, thin white lines that mapped the geography of her survival. Because I am her. The silence stretched between them like a bridge over an abyss. Then Elena laughed, a sound edged with hysteria, the kind of laughter that comes when reality shifts so completely that sanity becomes negotiable. You're Anna Scott, the perfect wife he compares me to constantly, the one who understood his needs, who never disappointed him. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. He's killing me too, isn't he? You're not crazy. You're in danger. I can't leave. The prenup I signed. God, I was so stupidly grateful he wanted to marry me. If I go, my father's career gets destroyed, and I get nothing while Glenn keeps everything. Elena's voice cracked. He has recordings of me losing control. Proof that I'm unstable. Your life is worth more than politics or money. Is it? You ran, and where did it get you? You're hiding in bathrooms, working for minimum wage, while he lives in penthouses. Elena's despair was sharp enough to cut. He always wins. I'm alive. My children are alive. Children. The word was sharp with surprise. He said you were too selfish for children. That's why he chose me, because I want a family and you never did. Another lie in the mythology he'd constructed. Anne wondered how many fictional versions of her existed, each crafted to manipulate a different victim. Twins, 10 years old. They think he's dead because that was kinder than explaining why their father tried to kill their mother. Elena pulled away from the conversation like touching fire. I should go. He tracks everything. My phone, my car, my time. Elena, please. I know women who can help, like they helped you into a life of looking over your shoulder. Elena's cruelty was the trapped animal kind, striking at the only person offering kindness. At least when he destroys me, it'll be from a penthouse. She left before Anne could respond, heels clicking against marble with hollow determination. Anne remained in the stall, shaking, wondering if desperation had just signed all their death warrants. That night, she held Joaquin and Esperanza closer than usual, memorizing their weight in her arms, the sound of their breathing, the trust in their sleeping faces. When Joaquin stirred and asked if she was crying, she lied and said it was allergies. Days passed without consequence. No investigators, no questions, no men in expensive suits disrupting the gallery's quiet routine. Anne began to believe Elena had chosen self-preservation over confession. Then Elena returned. This time, the scarf couldn't hide the bruises circling her throat like a necklace of violence. Her left eye was swollen despite careful concealer, and she moved like walking hurt. It's getting worse, Elena said without preamble, finding Anne in the restoration room where she was repairing a damaged canvas, work that required steady hands and infinite patience. Ever since the engagement announcement, he drinks more, gets angrier faster. Last night she touched her throat. He said next time he won't stop. Anne set down her restoration tools. What do you want from me? I want to know how you survived that last night. How you disappeared so completely he had to fake your death. Elena's voice carried new steel beneath the fear. I want to know if someone like me can find that kind of strength. So Anne told her. Not everything. Not about the twins in shelters, not about the origami birds, not about the network of broken women who'd become her family, but enough. The careful planning, the hidden resources, the willingness to leave everything behind, including pieces of yourself that would never grow back. "I'm not brave like you," Elena said when the story was finished. "I wasn't brave. I was pregnant and bleeding and crawling through dirt toward a future I couldn't imagine." Anne's voice was gentle but uncompromising. "Courage comes after survival, not before." Elena touched her bruised throat. "He said his first wife learned not to make him repeat himself, that I should learn faster because he's less patient now. I never learned that lesson. That's why I had to run. Maybe that's why you lived to tell me about it." Raised voices from the main gallery interrupted them. Expensive shoes on marble, the particular energy that preceded violence. Anne's blood turned to ice as she recognized the voice that still haunted her nightmares. "Where is the curator who helped my fiancée last week? I want to speak with her immediately." "Glenny." "Here." 20 feet away, hunting. Anne grabbed Elena's arm. "Back exit, now!" But Elena straightened her shoulders with newfound resolve. "If I run now, he'll know something's wrong. He'll tear this place apart looking for answers." She met Anne's eyes. "Go. You have children to protect. I have nothing left to lose." "Elena." "Go." She pushed Anne toward the back room. "You survived once. Those babies need you to survive again." Anne ran. Through the alley, onto 3 different buses, checking reflections, using every skill the shelter women had taught her about staying invisible. When she reached home, the twins were doing homework at the kitchen table, safe in their ignorance of how close their world had come to ending. "Mama, you look scared," Joaquin observed with his artist's perceptive eyes. "What happened?" "Just a difficult customer," Anne lied, pulling them close, breathing in their scent of school supplies and innocence. "Tell me about your day, every single beautiful detail." As they chattered about ordinary things that felt precious as gold, Anne's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "He didn't recognize you, asked too many questions about the helpful curator. Be ready." That night, Anne sat by the window watching the street, waiting for the hammer to fall. 10 years of careful construction threatened by one moment of compassion, but even knowing the risk, she couldn't regret it. Some choices defined your soul. When morning came, it brought news that stopped Anne's heart. Elena Winters had called off her engagement to Glenn Scott, citing personal reasons. She'd moved back with her parents and hired private security. The society pages buzzed with speculation, but Anne only cared about one thing: Elena was alive. She'd chosen survival over comfort, truth over safety. A week later, a package arrived at the gallery. Inside, a single origami crane made from $100 bills, folded with the precision of someone who'd learned patience through suffering. The note was in Elena's careful handwriting. "For your children's future. From one survivor to another. He's looking for you now. Hired investigators, checking records. Be ready. You saved my life. I'll never forget that gift." Anne held the crane, understanding its true value. Not money, but time. Time to prepare for the confrontation she'd been avoiding for a decade. "Mama," Esperanza appeared beside her, drawn by her mother's stillness. "Why are you crying?" "Sometimes we cry when good things happen," Anne said, tucking the crane away carefully. "When people we care about find their freedom." "Will we find ours?" Joaquin asked from the doorway, too perceptive as always. Anne looked at her children, born in hiding, raised in shadows, but burning with life and hope despite it all. They deserved better than a life spent looking over their shoulders. "Yes," she promised, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Soon. The endgame was approaching. Elena's escape had lit a fuse that would burn until it reached the dynamite of truth. The hunter was becoming the hunted. That night's origami bird was different. Made from Elena's engagement announcement that Anne had printed with trembling hands, folded with 10 years of practice. The word she chose made her smile for the first time in weeks. Twice. He'd lost 2 women now to their own courage, their refusal to disappear quietly into his version of their stories. And he was about to lose so much more. Chapter 7. The twins' discovery. The box had been hidden for 10 years behind a loose brick in the wall, wrapped in plastic and prayers. And never meant for them to find it. But children have a way of discovering the very things we try to protect them from. It was Esperanza who found it first, chasing a ball that had rolled behind the radiator. "Mama, there's something here." By the time Anne arrived from the kitchen, both twins were sitting on the floor, the box open between them like Pandora's curse. Wedding photos spilled across the floor, medical records, the poisoning test results, and worst of all, the newspaper clipping about Glennie Scott's tragic loss of his wife. "Mama," Joaquin's voice was deadly calm, the way the air goes still before a tornado. "Why does this say you're dead?" Anne's knees gave out. She sank to the floor across from her children, seeing in their faces the death of innocence. 10 years of lies crumbling in seconds. "I can explain. This is him." Esperanza held up the wedding photo, her finger on Glennie's smiling face. "This is our father, the one you said was dead." "But he's not dead," Joaquin continued, pulling out more clippings Anne had saved. Society pages, business magazines, all featuring Glennie Scott, very much alive. "He's rich. He's famous. He thinks you're dead." "Please, let me." "You lied." Esperanza's scream was primal, 10 years of grief transmuting into rage. "We made him a grave. We cried for him. We thought we were orphans, but he's been here the whole time. He tried to kill me." Anne's voice was barely a whisper. "He was poisoning me. When I told him I was pregnant, he tried to strangle me. I ran to save us all." "Then why not tell the police?" Joaquin demanded. "Why hide? Why let us think?" "Look at the date." Anne pointed to the article about her death. 3 days after I ran. He had someone else's body identified as mine. A homeless woman who looked like me. He has judges, police, doctors in his pocket. If I'd surfaced, he'd have had me committed or killed, and you'd have been raised by a monster. The twins were silent, processing. Then Esperanza spoke, her voice small and broken. "We have a father who wanted us dead." "No." Anne pulled them close, though they resisted. "You have a mother who wanted you alive. That's all that matters." "It's not all that matters." Joaquin pushed away. "We had a right to know. We had a right to the truth. The truth would have destroyed you. The lies already did that." Esperanza was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "Do you know what it's like? Watching other kids with their dads, making up stories about our dead hero father because we were too ashamed to say we were abandoned? You weren't abandoned. I saved you. You saved yourself." Joaquin's accusation hit like a physical blow. "And you dragged us along, living in closets, eating from food banks, wearing charity clothes when he grabbed a magazine, Glennie on a yacht. "When he lives like this, that money is poisoned. Everything he touches. We're poisoned," Esperanza screamed. "We have his face, his blood. We're half monster, and you never told us." Anne watched her children shatter and felt her heart break with them. Every careful construction, every protective lie crumbling into dust. "I didn't want you to hate yourselves," she whispered. "I didn't want you to think you were born from evil." "But we were," Joaquin said flatly. "We were born from a man who tried to kill us." "You were born from love," Anne insisted. "My love. That's enough." "Is it?" Esperanza pulled out another document, the custody papers Glennie had prepared before Anne fled, claiming she was mentally unfit. "He was going to take us, raise us himself, to control me, to hurt me, not because he wanted you." "How do you know?" Joaquin's eyes, so like his father's, burned with something Anne had never seen before. How do you know he wouldn't have loved us? Because he's incapable of love. So are we. Esperanza's question was soft, deadly. If we're half him, are we half incapable too? No, you're nothing like him. You're kind and brilliant and... We're liars, Joaquin interrupted. Just like you taught us. Fake names, fake stories, fake lives. We're exactly like both our parents. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Anne saw her children with new eyes, the careful way they'd learned to navigate the world, always watching, always calculating. She'd raised them to survive, but at what cost? He killed our aunt's baby, Esperanza said suddenly, reading deeper into the medical records. The miscarriage. He caused it. We would have had a cousin, Joaquin whispered. A family. We have each other. It's not enough, both twins shouted in unison, then looked at each other in surprise. They rarely synchronized like that anymore, but pain had stripped them back to their most basic connection. What do you want me to say? Anne asked, exhausted. That I'm sorry? I'm sorry, every day. Sorry you were born into this. Sorry I couldn't give you normal. Sorry I fell in love with a monster and gave you his genes. We want to meet him. The words fell from Joaquin's mouth like stones. Esperanza nodded, her face set with determination. Absolutely not. You don't get to decide anymore, Esperanza said. You've been deciding for us for 10 years, making us live as ghosts. We have a right to face him. He'll destroy you. We're already destroyed, Joaquin said simply. At least this way we'll know why. Anne looked at her children. No, not children anymore. The truth had aged them in minutes, stripping away the last of their innocence. They were right. She'd stolen their choices in the name of protection. If you meet him, she said slowly, it can't be as his children. He can never know. Why? Esperanza challenged. What's he going to do? Kill us? He already tried that. He could take you. Legal manipulation, custody battles. He has resources we can't fight. Then we meet him without telling him, Joaquin said. The art competition, his mentorship program. We're already in. Anne's blood chilled. She'd forgotten about the business card, the offer to mentor young artists. Of course, the twins had already applied. They were their father's children, always 3 steps ahead. When? She asked, defeated. Next week, a gala for young artists, public, safe, lots of witnesses. Esperanza's smile was sharp. Don't worry, Mama. We learned from the best how to pretend. That night, Anne didn't sleep. She sat between their beds, watching them breathe, seeing Glenny in the angle of Joaquin's jaw, the way Esperanza frowned in her sleep. She'd tried so hard to protect them from their father's poison. But blood tells its own truths, and her children were done living lies. The origami bird she sent that night was different, made from their birth certificates, the real ones, with father unknown but the date marking them as conceived in marriage. The word she chose felt like prophecy, reckoning. In his penthouse, Glenny Scott studied the bird with shaking hands. The dates, the timing, the ghosts of possibility. Impossible, he whispered. But his dreams that night were full of children's faces, familiar as mirrors, accusing as judgments. The dead were rising, and they wore his eyes. Chapter 8. The stage is set. The Morrison Gallery had never looked more beautiful or felt more like a guillotine waiting for its moment. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow fragments across the assembled crowd like scattered diamonds, each refraction catching the light and throwing it back in patterns that should have been celebratory but felt ominous. Anne moved through the shadows between displays, adjusting already perfect arrangements with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, her fingers leaving barely visible tremors on the polished surfaces. Tonight, after 12 years of running, hiding, Surviving in the margins of her own life, it would all end tonight. The irony wasn't lost on her that this reckoning would happen in a place dedicated to preserving beauty, to capturing moments in time that would outlast their creators. How fitting that her own moment of truth would unfold, surrounded by artwork that bore witness to human suffering and triumph across centuries. The young artists are here, Marcus informed her, clipboard in hand, his voice carrying the particular pride of a curator who discovered genuine talent in unexpected places. Including your twins. They clean up nice, Anne. You must be extraordinarily proud. Proud. The word tasted like ashes mixed with honey, bitter and sweet in equal measure. Her children stood across the room in their borrowed formal wear, transformed from the shelter kids they'd once been into young people who belonged in this rarefied world. Joaquin wore a black suit that had been altered to fit his lean frame, the fabric making him look devastatingly like his father at that age. The same strong jawline, the same way of holding his shoulders that commanded attention without asking for it. Esperanza moved in a midnight blue dress that transformed her from girl to young woman in the space of an evening. Her dark hair swept up to reveal the elegant neck she'd inherited from Anne's mother. Her eyes bright with purpose and something harder, resolve. They were radiant, terrible, perfect, and they were walking into the lion's den with smiles on their faces and steel in their spines. "He's not here yet," Esperanza murmured, appearing at Anne's elbow with the practiced stealth she'd learned from years of making herself invisible when necessary. But his people are everywhere, security scattered through the crowd like they're expecting trouble. That woman with the tablet and the nervous energy is his personal assistant, Rebecca something. She keeps checking her phone. "You don't have to do this," Anne whispered urgently, gripping her daughter's wrist perhaps too tightly, feeling the delicate bones beneath silk and skin. "We can leave, right now. Walk out those doors and disappear again. Start over somewhere new, somewhere he'll never find us." "We're done running, Mama." Joaquin materialized on her other side like a shadow gaining substance, his presence steady and implacable. Done hiding in corners and jumping at every unexpected noise. Done pretending we don't have a father who owes us answers for 12 years of absence. "He owes us more than that," Esperanza added, her voice sharp enough to cut through the gallery's ambient murmur of polite conversation and clinking glasses. "He owes us a childhood where we didn't have to worry about keeping our voices down. Safety that wasn't contingent on staying invisible. Love that didn't come with the constant fear of having it ripped away. But we'll settle for watching him squirm under the weight of his own choices." Anne caught sight of Elena across the room, elegant in midnight blue that perfectly complemented her pale skin, her presence both surprising and somehow inevitable. The former fiancé moved through the crowd with the careful grace of someone who'd learned to navigate dangerous waters, and when she caught Anne's eye, she nodded slightly, a gesture of solidarity between survivors that spoke volumes. She'd come to witness the reckoning, to see justice served on the man who'd nearly destroyed them both. The gallery buzzed with the particular energy of an exclusive event, art critics mingling with collectors, young artists nervous and excited about their first major showing, society figures who attended such events more for the networking than the art. None of them knew they were about to witness something far more dramatic than the unveiling of promising new talent. "Mrs. Morrison wants you in the back," Marcus said, approaching with his clipboard and a slightly apologetic expression. Something about the lighting in the storage area affecting the main gallery displays. Anne knew it was a lie the moment she saw Mrs. Morrison across the room, deep in animated conversation with a prominent collector, her hands gesturing expressively as she discussed the provenance of a particular piece. But she went anyway, needing distance from what was about to unfold, needing a moment to steel herself for the confrontation that felt as inevitable as gravity. The corridor leading to the storage area was dimly lit, emergency lighting casting everything in shadows that seemed to move independently. Anne's footsteps echoed against the polished concrete floors, each sound amplifying her growing sense of dread. She fumbled for the light switch in the storage room, then froze as a familiar cologne filled her nostrils. Expensive, distinctive, a scent that had once meant safety and comfort before it became synonymous with fear and the metallic taste of mercury on her tongue. "Hello, Anne." The fluorescent lights blazed on with a harsh buzz, revealing him standing among the carefully wrapped artworks like a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. Glennie looked older but still imposing, his silver hair perfectly styled, his custom suit unable to disguise the slightly softened edges that came with age and too much good living. But his eyes, those were exactly the same. Cold, calculating, measuring her worth and finding her lacking. His smile was sharp as the knife he'd once held to her throat 12 years ago, not metaphorically but literally, the night before she ran. She could still remember the weight of it against her skin, the way he'd played with it as he discussed her future institutionalization with the casual air of someone planning a dinner party. "You're supposed to be dead," he said conversationally, as if commenting on the weather or the quality of the wine being served outside. "I identified your body myself, stood over what was left of some poor homeless woman, and told the coroner she was my beloved wife. Attended your funeral in a beautiful black suit, mourned you quite convincingly for the cameras." Anne's hand found the doorknob behind her, turning it frantically. Locked. Of course it was locked. He'd always been thorough in his planning, meticulous in his cruelty. "Nothing to say? You were always so articulate, especially in our marriage. Though I suppose you found your voice again in other ways." He pulled out a handful of origami birds from his jacket pocket, crushed and re-smoothed, the paper wrinkled but the words still visible. 12 years of harassment, Anne. 12 years of psychological warfare. That's a federal crime, you know. Stalking has such serious penalties these days. So is attempted murder. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, years of practice at hiding fear serving her well. "Prove it." His smile widened, showing teeth that were still perfect, still predatory. "Oh, wait, you can't. You're dead, remember? Dead women can't testify in court. Dead women can't file charges. They can only haunt, and I've never been susceptible to ghosts. I'm standing right here." "No, you're not. You're Maria Chen, undocumented gallery worker living under a stolen identity. Anne Scott died 12 years ago in a tragic accident. Her body identified by her grieving husband, death certificate signed by the coroner and filed in triplicate. Amazing what money can buy in this city, what doors it opens, what records it can create or destroy." Anne's mind raced, cataloging exits, weapons, anything that might give her an advantage. But this was his game, played on his terms, and he'd had 12 years to perfect the rules. "They're beautiful," Glennie said softly, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that had once made her feel cherished and now made her skin crawl. "The twins. Our twins, I assume. The timing is definitely conclusive, and the resemblance is striking." Ice flooded her veins, turning her blood to slush. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please. Joaquin has my jawline, the same way of tilting his head when he's thinking. Esperanza has my mother's nose and her stubborn chin. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own blood? My own genetic legacy walking around in borrowed clothes and stolen names? You didn't want them." The words scraped her throat raw. "You tried to kill us all. The mercury, the plans for the psychiatric hospital, the way you held that knife." "I wanted you gone," he interrupted, stepping closer so she could smell the bourbon on his breath. Dutch courage for what was coming, she realized. The pregnancy was an inconvenience at the time, a complication I wasn't prepared to deal with. But times change, perspectives evolve. I'm older now, more aware of my mortality. My legacy needs proper heirs, and what magnificent heirs they've become, despite your rather pedestrian parenting. You can't have them, can't I? He tilted his head, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. Let's examine the legal realities, shall we? Their birth certificates list no father, easily challenged with DNA evidence. Their mother is officially deceased, certified by the state. Their guardian is an illegal immigrant living under forged documents. One phone call to immigration, and they take you away while Family Services delivers my children to their rightful parent. It's really quite elegant in its simplicity. They'd never go with you. They hate you. They've spent their entire lives knowing what kind of monster you are. They don't even know me yet, he said with genuine amusement. That's easily remedied. Children are remarkably adaptable, especially when offered the life they should have had from the beginning. Private schools, trust funds, a family name that opens doors instead of slamming them shut. They'll come around once they understand what I can offer them. I'll tell everyone the truth. The poisoning, the theft, the attempted murder. Tell them what, exactly? That you're a ghost come back to life? That you abandoned your children to live in squalor while their father searched desperately for any trace of them? He tisked, shaking his head with mock sadness. No, Anne. The story writes itself. Mentally ill woman fakes her death, kidnaps children, raises them in poverty while their father grieves and searches and never gives up hope. I'm the victim here, the bereaved husband and father finally reunited with his stolen children. The door handle rattled suddenly, violently. Mama? Esperanza's voice, suspicious and afraid, carrying the sharp edge of protective instinct. Are you in there? Why is the door locked? She's fine, Glennie called out smoothly, his voice shifting to public charm mode. Just helping me examine some artwork for potential acquisition. Run along, dear. The adults are conducting business. Mama. Now Joaquin, his fist pounding against the solid oak door. Open this door right now. Protective, Glennie observed with what might have been genuine approval. Good. They'll need that instinct in my world. The weak don't survive at the levels I operate in. Anne moved without thinking, muscle memory and desperation driving her to grab a box cutter from the shipping supplies stacked nearby. You won't touch them. You won't get within 100 feet of my children. With that? How disappointing. I expected more creativity from you after all these years. He pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, like a gunslinger drawing his weapon. One call, Anne. Immigration. Or you can be reasonable for once in your stubborn life. Share custody. Let them experience the world they deserve, the opportunities they've been denied. I'll even set you up somewhere nice, a cottage upstate maybe. Generous visitation rights. You mean a cage? I mean a compromise. A chance for all of us to get what we want. Unless you'd prefer deportation followed by family court proceedings where you won't even be allowed to participate. His finger hovered over his phone. I hear detention centers are particularly terrible places for children to visit their parents. The pounding intensified, other voices joining the twins now. Elena's cultured tones, Mrs. Morrison's authoritative commands, the deeper voices of security personnel. But the door was solid oak, the lock industrial grade, designed to protect valuable artwork from thieves. They're making quite a scene, Glennie noted with amusement. Bad for their reputations as emerging young artists. Should I let them in? Show them their hysterical mother threatening their father with a box cutter? Document this moment for the custody hearing. Anne felt the trap closing around her, every move she might make already anticipated and countered. The box cutter trembled in her grip as she lowered it slowly. He was right, as he'd always been right in his cold calculations. 12 years of running, planning, surviving, and she was back exactly where she started, trapped by a man who held all the cards and knew exactly how to play them. Except, "You're forgetting something," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "What's that?" "They're your children, which means they're half you." She met his eyes directly, no longer the broken woman who'd crawled through his garden. "And you taught me exactly what that means." Confusion flickered across his face for the first time, a crack in his perfect composure. "What are you talking about?" Then the lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Anne heard the electronic lock click open, not forced, but disengaged from the inside. The twins had inherited more than just their father's jawline and their grandmother's nose. They'd inherited his strategic mind, his ability to plan several moves ahead, his ruthless efficiency when cornered. The door burst open like a dam breaking. Emergency lighting bathed everything in hellish red as Joaquin and Esperanza entered, moving with synchronized precision, flanking their mother like avenging angels materializing from shadow. Behind them pressed half the gallery crowd, phones held high, recording everything with the hungry intensity of witnesses to history. "Is this him?" Joaquin asked, his young voice carrying remarkable authority that cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Our father who tried to murder us before we were even born. The one who's been stalking our mother for 12 years? Esperanza added, her voice pitched to carry to every phone, every recording device, every witness. Even after faking her death to cover his crimes. Glennie's face cycled through emotions, shock at being outmaneuvered, rage at losing control, rapid calculation of damage and options. The crowd pressed closer, scenting scandal like sharks scenting blood. Elena pushed to the front, her phone steady and focused on his face, capturing every micro-expression for posterity. "You're confused, children," he began, reaching for his public persona, but Joaquin cut him off with surgical precision. "We're not confused. We're not children. We're the family you tried to erase from existence." He pulled out a folder thick with papers, printed emails, bank records, medical reports, 12 years of evidence Anne didn't even know they'd collected. But ghosts have a way of rising from the graves you dig for them, don't they, Dad? The word hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Dad. Such a simple word, such a basic relationship, twisted into an accusation more damning than any curse. "Security," Glennie called, but his people were trapped behind the crowd, unable to reach him through the press of bodies and phones. The gallery had become a courtroom, and public opinion was a judge he couldn't buy or intimidate. 12 years, Esperanza said, tears streaming down her face. Real or performed, Anne couldn't tell, and it didn't matter. 12 years of hiding in shelters and safe houses because you couldn't stand the thought of us existing. 12 years of our mother jumping at shadows, afraid you'd finish what you started that night. 12 years of growing up without a father because you chose money and reputation over love. Joaquin continued, his voice breaking slightly. The crack of a young man trying to be strong while confronting the source of all his family's pain. 12 years of watching our mother work 3 jobs just to keep us fed and housed and safe from you. But we're not afraid anymore, Esperanza said, lifting her chin with defiance that was pure Anne. We're here. We're alive. We're everything you tried to destroy, and everyone's watching you face the consequences. It was beautiful and terrible and perfectly orchestrated. The twins had planned this confrontation down to the last detail, using their father's own tactics against him. Public exposure, social destruction, the kind of fall that no amount of money could cushion because it was built on truth witnessed by dozens. Glennie looked at Anne, and for the first time in 12 years, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not of her, she'd never been the threat he'd painted her as. Fear of them. Of what he'd created and tried to destroy, now standing before him with his own ruthlessness, reflected back and doubled, tempered by the compassion he'd never possessed. "Next week," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowd to reach her ears alone. "The St. Regis Hotel, 8 p.m. The merger announcement. If you want to end this properly, that's where it happens." Then he was gone, pushing through the crowd like a man fleeing demons, his security detail forming a protective barrier as he escaped his own children, as if they were avenging spirits risen from the grave, which Anne supposed they were in every way that mattered. "Mama?" Esperanza's voice was small now, the performance dropping away to reveal the frightened girl beneath. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Anne pulled her children close, feeling them shake with adrenaline and something deeper. Grief, maybe, for the father they'd finally met and found exactly as monstrous as promised. Grief for the family they might have been in some other world where love was stronger than pride and fear. "You saved me," she whispered, holding them tight enough to feel their heartbeats against her chest. "We saved each other," Joaquin corrected, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "That's what family does. That's what you taught us." The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, videos already uploading to social media platforms where they'd spread like wildfire. By morning, Glennie Scott would be trending across the internet. The billionaire confronted by the family he'd abandoned, the children he'd denied, the wife he'd declared dead while she raised his twins in poverty. "What's next week?" Esperanza asked as they walked back into the main gallery, arms linked like survivors of a battle. "What merger?" Anne thought of the invitation Glennie had thrown like a gauntlet, the challenge embedded in his words. The St. Regis Hotel, 8 p.m. His last stand or his final trap. She couldn't tell which. "The end," she said simply, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "One way or another, next week, all of this ends." The twins exchanged one of their wordless looks, that communication that had survived everything, stronger than any storm he'd tried to create. "Then we'll be ready," they said in unison, their voices blending like a song of war. Anne believed them with every fiber of her being. Her children had proven tonight that they were survivors, inheritors of strength rather than weakness. Next week they'd prove they were something more, warriors in their own right, ready to finish what he'd started 12 years ago. The stage was set. The players were in position. The first act had ended with his retreat and their victory. All that remained was the final curtain. Chapter 9. The Revelation. The Saint. Regis Ballroom glittered like a jewelry box. 500 of New York's elite assembled to witness Glennie Scott's greatest triumph. The merger with Castillo Industries would create an entertainment empire worth $60 billion. Champagne flowed like water, and congratulations fell like rain. But Glennie's hands shook as he adjusted his platinum cufflinks. He'd spent a week in damage control. The gallery videos had gone viral, but his PR team had spun it brilliantly. A disturbed woman coaching children to ambush a grieving widower. Mental illness, they whispered. Delusions, seeking money. The elite closed ranks, as they always did, protecting their own. 5 minutes, Mr. Scott, his assistant murmured. Glennie nodded, scanning the crowd. Security at every exit. Metal detectors at the doors. Guest list triple-checked. Anne and her brats couldn't touch him here. This was his kingdom, his moment, his champagne. He turned to find a server with a tray. Young woman, early 20s, familiar somehow. She smiled and Glenie's blood chilled. Carmela, Anne's sister, the one he'd groomed and discarded 12 years ago. "Hello, Glenie," she said softly. "Remember me?" The champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on marble. The sound drew stares, whispers. Carmela melted back into the crowd before security could react, leaving only her ghost and his racing heart. "Mr. Scott?" His assistant looked concerned. "Are you?" I'm fine, but sweat beaded on his forehead. If Carmela was here, then... The lights dimmed. Showtime. Glenny climbed the stage on legs that felt disconnected from his body. The teleprompter glowed with his prepared remarks, but the words swam before his eyes. He gripped the podium, knuckles white, and began. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this historic evening. The speech flowed automatically. Market projections, synergy opportunities, shareholder value. The crowd nodded along, hypnotized by numbers and power. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the merger logo, two companies becoming one, a perfect union. But before we proceed, Glenny continued, deviating from script, I want to address the recent allegations made against me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. His lawyers had advised against this, but Glenny needed control of the narrative. As many of you know, I lost my wife Anne 12 years ago, a tragedy that haunts me still. Recently, a disturbed woman has been claiming to be her, coaching children to harass me. I want to assure you all. The screen behind him flickered. The merger logo vanished, replaced by a photograph. Anne in her wedding dress, radiant and alive. Glenny spun around, fumbling for the remote. The image changed. Medical records, test results, the word poisoned stamped across them in red. Technical difficulties, he said, but his mic squealed with feedback. The screen kept changing. Police reports, bank transfers, a paper trail 12 years in the making. Then the lights went out completely. In the darkness, a voice rang out, clear, strong, achingly familiar. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ann Scott, and contrary to my husband's claims, I'm very much alive. A single spotlight blazed to life, illuminating the ballroom entrance. Anne stood there in the white dress from their wedding, altered to fit her thinner frame but unmistakable. The crowd gasped as one. 12 years ago, Anne continued, walking slowly down the aisle between tables. My husband tried to murder me. He poisoned me systematically, stole my inheritance, and when I became pregnant, he attempted to strangle me to death. Security, Glenny shouted, but his voice cracked like a teenager's. Remove this woman. But security didn't move. Anne kept walking, and in her wake came others. Elena, Carmela, a dozen women Glenny recognized with growing horror. Former assistants, discarded mistresses, all the casualties of his appetites. I ran that night, Anne continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. Pregnant, bleeding, terrified. I gave birth to twins in a basement, hiding from the man who'd vowed to love and cherish me. She reached the stage and climbed the steps with deliberate grace. Glenny backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The screen behind them now showed the twins, school photos, art awards, candid moments of children growing up in shadows. For 12 years I hid our children, let them believe their father was dead rather than tell them the truth, that he'd tried to erase them before they drew their first breath. Lies, Glenny managed. All lies. This woman is clearly the mother of your children. Joaquin's voice cut through his denial. The boy emerged from behind the screen, and the crowd gasped again. The resemblance was undeniable, Glenny's face perfected by youth and Anne's gentle eyes. The woman you tried to murder. Esperanza joined her brother, and together they flanked their mother. A family portrait 12 years delayed. DNA tests were filed with the court yesterday, Anne said calmly. 99.9% match. These are your children, Glenny. The ones you've been denying existed. The crowd had become a jury, phones out despite the supposed recording ban, capturing every moment. Glenny saw his board members exchanging glances, his investors backing toward exits. Even if... He stopped, regrouped. Even if this fantasy were true, you abandoned them, raised them in poverty. What kind of mother? The kind who chose their lives over your money. Anne's voice never wavered. The kind who worked 3 jobs to feed them rather than let them be raised by a monster. I could have given them everything. You gave us everything, Esperanza said, but she was looking at Anne. You gave us love, safety, truth, eventually. That's more than he ever offered. You don't know what I offered, Glennie snarled, the mask finally slipping. You ran before I could. He stopped, realizing what he'd just admitted. The ballroom held its breath. Before you could what? Joaquin pressed. Finish killing our mother. Dispose of us like you disposed of Miranda Fletcher. The name hit like a bomb. Miranda, his first business partner whose suicide had made him sole owner of the company, whose body had shown the same poisons found in Anne's bloodstream. You can't prove anything, Glennie said, but he was drowning now, each word pulling him deeper. Actually, we can. Elena stepped forward, holding a tablet. Your former security chief had a crisis of conscience. 20 hours of recorded conversations about Miranda, about Anne, about all of us. He's already spoken to the FBI. The screen lit up with footage, security cameras from 12 years ago. Glennie crushing pills into Anne's tea, Glennie accessing her accounts, Glennie on the phone. Make sure the body's too damaged for close inspection. I need this to stick. Fake, Glennie whispered, but even he didn't believe it. Mr. Scott. FBI agents materialized from the crowd, badges gleaming. We need you to come with us. You can't. I have rights, my lawyers. Your lawyers are already at the federal building, the lead agent said, along with your CFO, who's been very cooperative about the embezzlement charges. As they cuffed him, Glennie looked at Anne with pure hatred. You poisoned them against me, my own children. We were never yours, Joaquin said quietly. You made that choice 12 years ago. Every child deserves a father, Esperanza added, but not every man deserves to be one. They led him away through a gauntlet of cameras and whispers. The empire he'd built on bones was crumbling in real time, stock prices plummeting on the screens around the room. Anne stood on the stage, her children beside her, facing 500 witnesses to their resurrection. The silence stretched until someone, Elena, began to clap. Others joined until the ballroom thundered with applause for the woman who'd refused to stay dead. The merger is obviously cancelled, Anne said into the mic, and nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. But since you're all here and the champagne's already paid for, perhaps we could toast to new beginnings. She raised a glass. Water, Joaquin noticed, not champagne. Old habits died hard. To the women who survive, Anne said, to the children who endure, and to justice, which may come slowly but comes surely. The toast echoed through the ballroom, but Anne only had eyes for her children. They'd walked through fire to stand here, in the light, unashamed and unafraid. Was it worth it? Joaquin asked quietly. 12 years for this moment. Anne thought of all they'd lost, safety, comfort, innocence, but also what they'd gained, strength, resilience, each other. Ask me tomorrow, she said, pulling them close, when we wake up free. The band, uncertain but professional, began to play. People milled about, unsure whether to leave or stay, but Anne didn't care about any of them. She danced with her children in the ruins of Glennie's empire, their shadows long and proud on the ballroom floor. For the first time in 12 years, they had nothing to fear from the dark. The revelation was complete. The truth, finally, had set them free. Chapter 10, 12 Years of Love and Pain. The federal holding cell smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. Glennie Scott sat on the metal bench, his designer suit wrinkled beyond recognition, watching dawn break through a window cross-hatched with bars. The FBI had questioned him for 16 hours straight. His lawyers had abandoned him when the security chief's recordings proved authentic. His empire had dissolved overnight, board members distancing themselves like he was contagious. "Visitor," the guard announced. Glennie's heart leaped. His remaining lawyers, an ally, someone to post bail? Anne walked in and his hope curdled into rage. She looked different in daylight, in jeans and a simple sweater instead of that theatrical wedding dress, smaller than he remembered, older. But her eyes, those dark eyes that had once gazed at him with love, now held something far more dangerous than hatred. Pity. Don't. His voice was hoarse from shouting his innocence. Whatever speech you've prepared, save it. No speech. Anne sat across from him, hands folded. Just questions. One mother to a father who never was. I could have been a great father. When? Between poisoning me and stealing my inheritance? Or after, when you were strangling me for telling you I was pregnant? I was angry. You surprised me. If you'd told me properly, you'd have what? Celebrated? Thrown a party? Stop lying, Glennie. At least grant me that courtesy after 12 years. He studied her, looking for the girl he'd married. That Anne had been soft, trusting, eager to please. This woman was carved from harder stone. "Why did you come?" he asked finally. "The twins wanted to. I convinced them to wait in the car." She paused. "They're struggling. All their lives, they've defined themselves as the children of a dead man. Now they have to reconcile that with you. Let me see them. No, they're my children. They're my children. You're just the man who donated DNA and tried to eliminate the result." Glennie slammed his fist on the table. The guard stepped forward, but Anne didn't flinch. "You turned them against me," he snarled, "filled their heads with poison. The only poison in our lives came from you. Literally." Anne pulled out a photo, the twins at the gallery, radiant with pride. "Look at them, Glennie. Really look. See what you threw away." Despite himself, he looked. The boy had his jawline, but softened somehow, made kinder. The girl had his mother's nose, but paired with a smile he'd never seen on his family's faces. Genuine, warm, unguarded. "They're brilliant," Anne continued. "Joaquin speaks 5 languages and paints like an old master. Esperanza plays 3 instruments and writes poetry that makes me cry. They're everything you could have wanted in heirs. Then let me. They're also kind, compassionate. They volunteer at the shelter where they were born, teaching art to other children in hiding. They use their pain to help others heal." Anne's voice hardened. "Everything you're not, everything you could never teach them. I could change, get therapy, anger management, whatever the court requires. You had 12 years to change. Instead, you spent it building a lie on my supposed grave, dating women young enough to be your daughter, getting engaged to Elena. Tell me, when were you planning to start poisoning her?" "I never. Your security chief's recordings say otherwise. Small doses in her wine, just enough to make her compliant." Anne shook her head. "You can't help yourself, can you? It's not about love or control, it's about destruction. You touch things and they wither. Get out." Glennie's voice was low, dangerous. "Get out before you what? You have no power here, no money to buy your way out, no connections to threaten me with. You're just a man in a cage, exactly where you belong." She stood to leave, then paused. "They wanted me to give you this." Anne placed an envelope on the table. Inside, Glennie found 2 letters in careful handwriting. Joaquin's was brief. "I spent 10 years mourning a father who never existed. I won't spend another minute on the man who does. You're not dead to me. That would require having lived in my heart first. You're nothing." Esperanza's was longer, more complex, filled with the kind of pain only a daughter could inflict. "I used to dream about you, Create stories about why you left, why you couldn't love us. Now I know the truth. You chose not to. Every day for 12 years, you chose yourself over us. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because carrying hate for you would make me like you, and I'd rather die than be anything like you. Glennie's hands shook. The papers fluttered to the floor like dying birds. They're children, he whispered. They don't understand. They understand perfectly. You're the one who never understood. Love isn't possession. Children aren't property, and women aren't disposable. I loved you once. No, Anne's voice was certain. You loved the idea of me. Young, talented, trusting, someone you could mold and control and discard when I became inconvenient. That's not love. That's collecting. The guard signaled time was up. Anne turned to leave, then looked back one last time. Your trial starts next month. 23 counts, including attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement. Your lawyers say you're looking at 30 to life. She paused. The twins won't be there. They've seen enough of you to last a lifetime. Anne. Her name cracked in his throat. I'm sorry. She studied him for a long moment. I believe you. But you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry you lost. Sorry the world sees you for what you really are. What am I? The question escaped before he could stop it. Empty, Anne said simply. A man so empty he had to fill himself with other people's lives, talents, dreams. But you could never fill that void, could you? Not with my designs, not with Miranda's company, not with all the women you've consumed and discarded. She left without another word. Glennie sat in the silence, her letters at his feet, her truth in his ears. Outside, he knew his children waited in a car. His brilliant, beautiful children who'd rather forget he existed than claim him as father. The guard came to return him to his cell. As they walked the gray corridors, Glennie saw his reflection in the polished steel. Hollow eyes, gray skin, the face of a man who'd gained the world and lost his soul. Anne drove home in silence, the twins reading books in the back seat. They'd insisted on coming, on being present for this final chapter, but she'd protected them from the actual confrontation. Some wounds didn't need witnessing. Did you give him our letters? Esperanza asked finally. Yes. Did he read them? Yes. Did he cry? Anne met her daughter's eyes in the mirror. Number. But I think finally he understood what he lost. Good, Joaquin said quietly. Understanding is worse than ignorance. Now he'll spend every day knowing what he threw away. They drove through the city that had been their hiding place and battlefield for 12 years, past the shelter where the twins were born, past the gallery where truth finally caught up with lies, past the buildings where Anne had cleaned floors and folded 1,000 paper birds of revenge. What now? Esperanza asked as they pulled up to their apartment. Small still, but theirs, honest, free. Now we live, Anne said, without fear, without hiding, without him shadowing every moment. Will we take his name? Joaquin asked. Legally, I mean, now that everyone knows? Anne considered. Scott was a powerful name, one that had opened doors even as it imprisoned them. But it was also the name of a man who'd tried to erase them. That's your choice, she said finally. You're old enough to decide who you want to be. The twins exchanged their silent communication, then spoke in unison. Robles. We're Anne Robles's children. Anne blinked back tears as they climbed the stairs to their tiny apartment. Inside, Elena had left flowers, birds of paradise, exotic and resilient. Other women from the network had left cards, gifts, testimonies of their own survivals. We should do something, Esperanza said suddenly. With the money, I mean. When the lawyers finish with restitution. What kind of something? A shelter, Joaquin said. Like the one where we were born, but better. Safe places for women and children who need to disappear. Art programs, Esperanza added. Music lessons. All the things that saved us when we had nothing else. Anne pulled her children close, breathing them in. 12 years ago, she'd run into the night with nothing but the lives they carried. Now they stood in the light, planning how to help others find their way out of darkness. "I love you both more than all the stars," she whispered. "More than diamonds?" they responded, the old ritual. "More than justice," Joaquin added. "More than freedom," Esperanza continued. "More than anything," Anne promised. "More than anything that was, is, or ever will be." That night, for the first time in 12 years, Anne didn't check the locks twice, didn't jump at shadows, didn't plan escape routes. She simply held her children and let them hold her. 3 survivors who'd learned that love wasn't just stronger than hate. It was the only revenge worth taking. In his cell, Glennie Scott stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks like stars he'd never see again. Somewhere in the city, his children were growing brilliant and kind without him, building the family he'd tried to destroy. He'd spent 12 years as a king in a tower of his own making. They'd spend the rest of their lives free. The ghost of what could have been would haunt him forever. 3 hearts beating in rhythm, a love that had survived his worst, a family that had risen from the ashes of his cruelty. Anne was right. Understanding was worse than ignorance. And Glennie Scott would understand every day for the rest of his life exactly what he'd thrown away. The birds had finally come home to roost.